Welcome to the AppTechCo Podcast, where we spotlight the most innovative app providers in front of telco decision makers. Today, we'll be deep diving into Smart Walkie, a game changing solution for real time business communication. We'll talk about what gaps it's filling, how and why should telcos take notice, and how it's transforming sectors like logistics and public safety. To help us unpack this, we have Wenhan, CEO Smart Walkie. Wenhan, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Telcos have been in the game for decades, and they have been primarily stuck selling basic voice and data plans. Meanwhile, businesses have evolved a lot more. They have become more hungry for communication tools that are instant, that are secure, and that actually work in real time. Especially when you see things getting critical. How did you see this gap, and what made you decide to build SmartWalkie?
So the story is started 10 years ago. So actually, in my previous company, we were a consulting company for mobile apps. And the story started with one of the Singtel product manager actually asking us to build a walkie-talkie application, right? So at the time, we simply repackaged an existing application and we resold it to Singtel. And then that actually gave us 2 years to sort of learn the market and like what customers want um and like how to go to market. And as the 2 years came up, we were thinking that we could actually rebuild the application because there were some concerns and issues that the customers had that was not being addressed by the original app maker, right? So we decided to build our own and uh yeah, and it just went on from there because I like to tell the story that I put up a landing site, which is a single page, just to see if anybody will contact us. And then I got contacted by a few companies, and now I was like, this is really interesting because it's really rare that you put out a landing site with some ads, of course, and people start calling you, right? So
Yeah.
and I got excited and I started looking deeper into the market. Yeah. So you can say it's very customer driven and also telco driven actually.
So I think that is very interesting insight. I feel like you sort of stumbled upon this new product and that you built it up over different steps. Did you always see telcos as the perfect partner for this kind of tech, or was there like a light bulb moment and any moment in this journey that you just spoke about where you were like, okay, this is something that we need to build specifically for the telcos?
Yeah. So I remember when I was building the app and I was doing some projections like a SaaS model, right? So I was measuring out. So this is my SaaS model. I charge per user per year, and I was plotting out the revenue, and I was like, "Oh, this is not going to make it. This is simply not going to make it." And at the time, we were blessed that we were like quite close to Singtel. Actually, my previous company was funded by one of the venture capital arm, and and because the account managers brought me with to the sales meetings. Remember the original account manager and the product managers, so I was quite close to them, and I started to figure out that customers don't just want the app, right? They also want the SIM cards that come with it, the connectivity, but they also want devices. And on my side, actually, what eventually we evolve into is actually a MVNO, a mobile virtual network operator, right? So we have a portion of revenue that goes with the product side and the account managers of a telco, but we also drive our own marketing and our own. We get the SIM cards as wholesale, and then we resell it to customers, right? So that is actually the model that worked because without those other two pillars of connectivity and hardware, I don't think we can survive. I don't think we will have been able to survive until now, just purely on a software only model. So um yeah, so that's the answer. What we Of course the telcos account managers do help, and they do help in closing large deals, but we also have our MVNO to serve smaller customers that are traditionally neglected by the account managers.
Right. So I see this as like an all in one sort of device. But I want to learn more. What is the real problem here, and how did you figure out, or how did you come to the conclusion that the traditional push to talk systems are failing businesses today?
So when you think of walkie-talkies or push to talk, you think of devices with antennas, right? So That is meant for a local area, a small area. But we also found customers who have larger buildings, larger industrial plants, logistic customers go all around the country. So those need a different kind of system. And um, we didn't create the market. The market need was actually created and fulfilled by um, by a 2G system, I would say. So if you go back way into history, you'll see a 2G system. In US, it's called Nextel. Um, and so the user behavior is there. And basically what we did is just to migrate them over to a 4G system. So a lot of the customers came over and migrated, and along the way, we of course in the same industries that need group communication, they need instant communication. Once they see their friends or their competitors using it, they get interested in it as well. So like it's really funny. We have like directors using it to coordinate with their team, which is not one industry that I that I thought I would be in. Yeah.
So that is really interesting. I actually had a question prepared for you later where I wanted to talk about what is the weirdest industry you've seen this being used in. And funeral homes definitely cut the mark there.
Yeah, but
Can
if you think
you?
about it, in Singapore, there's a procession. So there's a procession, when as one of
Yeah.
the last rites is a procession, and sometimes that stretches a big distance. And I guess that's why they need a walkie-talkie. So yeah, I mean, it really goes back to the need for group communication, instant communication over a large area.
No, yeah, that definitely does make sense. You were mentioning migrating your customers from 2G to 4G. Can you tell me a bit more about the time you felt like you realized, or the businesses that you were working with realized that they were losing out because they were using simply outdated technology?
This happened over a couple of years. Basically, the 2G system needed to go offline, and you need to go offline because the spectrum that you used was very expensive, and the spectrum needed to be reused for 5G, right? So customers needed to switch, but and basically it kind of looked like this kind of devices, right? So very old candy bar devices. So because and the customers wanted something like that, but they couldn't find um comparable 4G systems. So I would say that our customers have a very niche requirement that is not easy, that's not fulfilled by most of the consumer hardware companies out there, right? So things like having a loudspeaker, having a push to talk button. So these are devices that are made for this use case. So already the customers can't find the devices, and of course they can't find the app, and what they can find is the SIM card though. But that only solves one third of their problem. Yeah. So yeah, basically our model then was to, hey, you got a 2G device, we have a 4G equivalent. It's pretty much the same. Time for you to switch. So it just became a migration exercise.
That sounds interesting. I saw that you showed your device and you were talking about some different features like the speaker. Would you mind sharing with us a little more in detail? What are some of the key features that truly set this device apart?
Yeah. So I remember when we started, and also when Singtel started selling this, the it was like a Samsung All Prime series. I think that was 2017 or 2016. So the speakers were tiny. and and basically yeah, as a walkie-talkie, when you speak into it, you want the other person to hear, right? But the other person doesn't hear because speakers were not so good. And so that was one of the major problems. And it is still so over the years, speakers have gotten better, even though they are a smartphone form factor, they have gotten louder. But at the time, there was one major issue. So we had to go and find devices that had good speakers. We are and that is one of the requirement. And then the other requirement is actually the push to talk button. So although our app supports iOS and Android, right? But obviously iPhones don't have that many buttons. But and Android devices, unfortunately, they don't allow you to use the button when the screen is off, right? And a lot of times there's the volume up or volume down button, but there's no third button to use. So we also have to find devices that have this purpose, have this third button. So I would say for push to talk phone is really two things: the speaker loudness and the ability to just push and reply. Because um going back to the need for instant requirement, when you hear something, you want to pick up the thing and just reply. You don't want to unlock the screen, open the app, press the screen button, then it takes way too long. So the users really wanted that, and you have to remember our users are usually all outdoors, so it's not like indoor where a speaker and the sound reverberates back to you, right? When outdoor, it's really very different. There's noise. There's your speaker voice just goes to some other direction. It doesn't go back to you. Um, and they might actually be driving, or they might be carrying something, so they don't have time to unlock the devices and swipe up and do all the things that consumers do. Yeah, and remember, there was a period of time where phones had no touch ID or no face ID or fingerprint recognition to unlock, right? So yeah, that was another problem. So there are a lot of these user interaction issues which kind of force us to get on push to talk hardware. So these are devices we source from China, and we make sure it's as good as we can get at that time, and make sure it's purpose fit for the need for instant communication. Yeah. So and these keypad devices, they have keypads. So interestingly, like if I want to call you and I know your digit is like 123, I can just type 123. I type 123 and then I will push the talk and it goes to you. So there's no need to interact with the screen as well. Yeah. So so a lot of these behaviors that the users previously had, that we had to make sure the hardware that we sell is as good as what they are migrating from.
So that's very interesting. I feel like the entire design of the device is pretty much based on user behavior and what people in these different sectors would need on an everyday basis to get about their work. What I want to ask you next is what is one of the big reasons that you think a telco should jump on board with Smart Walkie?
Okay. So this push to talk is a very niche, I would say it's a niche industry or niche need. Not all industries need it, but I think it also changes. So one reason people use traditional radio is they need a backup communication method if the telco goes down, right? So that's one reason why people still use conventional walkie-talkies, because it's I control it and it's a backup system. So with the advent of 5G and private 5G, in some countries you can have your private 5G. There is a move towards these traditional radios towards a totally private 5G. So a company can set up their base station and they can serve their own smartphones with a special SIM card, right? And there is also network slicing on 5G. And what that means is the telco can set up the infrastructure, and it looks like a normal telco, but you get priority. Sorry. So you can be sure of the latency, you can be sure of the bandwidth, and it doesn't matter if like 1,000 people suddenly show up, your devices won't get congested. Your devices will still perform as normal. So I think that is the interesting thing. So this used to be doable in 4G, but it was technically very difficult, which is why a lot of telcos don't want to do it and don't want to sell it. But network slicing is now a feature of 5G, and that's something really interesting for us, because a lot of our customers, they want logically private networks, but they don't want to spend so much on maintaining a base station, and not just one base station, but to cover a building that there is a lot more cost in there. So and then it also enables the customer to say this is a backup system. Yeah. So I think with 5G, there is a new opportunity that telcos should explore in this case.
So, Wenhan, can you walk me through how Smart Walkie would integrate into the telco system currently? Is this just a plug and play thing, or does it require a complete different and new setup from your side?
Yeah, so I think we will be classified as an OTT. So we are telco agnostic. It just works on data, whether it's Wi-Fi or 4G or 5G. There is one feature that we can do where we integrate, which is to log in the user according to their SIM card. And that requires a bit of telco integration, but that is purely optional. Without that, the user will just log in normally with the username and password. Yeah. Um, and yeah, so that's one. And for the other one, for the 5G network slicing, it can also be done by application. So some applications get higher priority. So that's something that the telcos can consider as well.
Right. I think that is quite interesting. Can you give us an example of how would a telco pitch Smart Walkie to their businesses or to their customers? What would be the hook for them? What would be that one thing that the customer would be like, okay, this is something that I want to look to implement as well?
So I think the scenario is that if you go into a company that has a lot of deskless workers, typically right now, as a telco, you might sell a SIM card, right? You might sell a SIM card with voice and SMS. But then you also see that guy carrying around a walkie-talkie. So it's really two devices. And then it becomes, oh, why don't we combine the two devices? But the customers will then tell you, wait, but our walkie-talkie does group communication. Yours does phone calls only. So that's where we usually enter the picture with the app, right? So the app replaces the group communication, and we can do multiple groups and bridging and things like that. And then the customer's next concern will be, wait, but what if Singtel goes down? Or what if the 5G isn't working so well? And that's where the new deployments of private 5G or network slicing might actually resolve that concern. And you move the customer from voice only communication to data communication, because right now it's not like 20 years ago when people are still on voice saying, hey, shut off this valve or on this valve. So a lot of it is IoT based, a lot of it is data based. They actually do You actually need to move them to a data platform where they are sure of the reliability. And push to talk is just one of it. So you can use push to talk to migrate them, and then you can also say all your apps, all your internal applications that connect back to your internal sensitive uh, IT systems, ERP systems, they still work, right? They only work in this 5G network. They don't work when you go outside, and it works reliably. And the latency really matters in some use cases as well. So just an example, we had a customer which is like kind of a construction company, and they were lifting big items, and that sub-second reliability is really important for them, right? They want to be really sure, because they are pretty much timing the movement of a huge object, right? And they want to be really sure that when I say stop, the other guy actually presses the button and says stop, right? So if you can solve the push to talk reliability issue, then the IT will get involved, and all the IoT systems will get on, because it's secure and it's private, and you can run all the other applications on it. Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. Even if, let's say, Singtel goes down, the device is still okay to run. That makes it really reliable.
Yeah.
So Wenhan, telcos are in a very competitive market. How does Smart Walkie help telcos break that cycle and start making real money off of something like this and offering this to their customers?
Right now, if you compare three telcos, right, they're all selling SIM cards with voice and data, right? So it becomes really competitive, and I think the telcos are sort of understanding that it is really competitive. So I think one way is to, like us, to expand into hardware, to sell hardware that is coupled with the service and the SIM card connectivity. Because with that, then the customers become much more sticky, and of course, you get a higher ARPU as well. And it is also common in the hardware space that you have longer term contracts for maintenance, and also device tech refresh and device maintenance. So all this becomes more sticky, because when it's not so easy for customer to say, hey, I'm just going to switch out my SIM cards A to SIM cards B today, right? It as you bundle a product, stickiness increases, and the ability to just switch becomes harder, because the thing is, if your workers are using a device that they are familiar and they like, right? They probably want the same thing 2 years later. They don't want like something else, right? So and if you can expand your offering so that it's not a line by line comparison, in a tender, then you can charge more, and of course, uh, customers will be more likely to stick with you over a long period of time. Yeah.
So, how do you think this would fit into a telco's revenue strategy? Would this be a premium service that they offer with a bundle, or would this be something separate? How do you see this working out for a telco?
So it will definitely be on the enterprise side. So the account managers need to handle it. The issue with telcos right now is most of them don't handle hardware, or they handle it one off, right? And they don't have policy, they don't have the processes for maintaining the hardware or looking at the hardware or procuring the correct hardware. So right now most of it is we just bundle a smartphone, right? Sometimes they put an Oppo smartphone, sometimes they put a Samsung smartphone. Does it really fit the customer requirement? Maybe half the time. Uh, do they have any recurring relationship in terms of maintaining the hardware? Probably not. They say, "Oh, it's spoiled. Please go to the service center for the manufacturer." So, but that's okay for consumers, but it's not what companies want. The person at the company that's buying that thing doesn't want to become the service person, right? So if you think about it, like a core part of our job is service, right? So we have WhatsApp group with all the customers, and if there are issues, we are basically the level one service, and we even take a look at the hardware and we do the replacement and repairs as well. So it's not something that is very difficult for any company to do. The question is it worthwhile to do it? And I think it is, because you get the relationship with the buyer, which comes in very helpful in 2 or 3 years, right? And a buyer doesn't want to handle so many problems. Let me share with you something interesting. So I think next month we'll be deploying a smart locker at a location, and this came because the buyer didn't want to handle any hardware anymore. So to give you the story, every time a device spoils previously, the worker will go to the manager and, hey, my device is spoiled, and then the manager will call us and blah 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 blah. Right? That's going to change. Now the worker will go to the locker, he will call us, and if we see that it needs a device replacement, we will unlock the locker, he will swap his device, and then we will set up the device for him. So the buyer just has to buy. He doesn't have to maintain, right? And of course, it's also good for us, right? I mean, it's actually a faster turnaround, I would say. The worker gets his device in less than 30 minutes versus the 1 day, because it takes time for things to go and here and there, right? And the buyer appreciates it, the worker appreciates it, we appreciate it, right? Because sometimes when the worker goes to the manager 1 day later, the manager, oh, what is this device doing on my table? Nobody knows. Yeah. So I think shortening this whole process, but at the same time providing better service, um, it's not difficult. It's whether it's worth it and whether telco wants to set up the processes and the team to do it.
I think that sounds wonderful. And that brings me to my next question. You've actually answered a lot of it already. But apart from just the customer not having to handle the devices or the support side of things, what are the top three wins do you see a telco having when they start integrating Smart Walkie?
Definitely, it's the new revenue opportunities now with the 5G and 5G private 5G and 5G network slicing. So um, again, if you think about it, I think it when a company buys enterprise phone lines, I don't think they buy it for 100% of their workers right now. A lot of the deskless workers are on non-company lines. So think about doubling or tripling your line count, because this is a group of users that previously did not need a company line. But honestly, they do need a company line and they do need a company phone, because these days it's no longer just a phone, it's like a company issued laptop. There's company sensitive information on it. You need certain applications to do the work, right? So if you switch your mindset from a phone communication, voice communication, to a computer, just that it's a handheld. There's actually a lot of every worker needs it, right? And when they need it, they also need the connectivity. So I would say in a lot of these few companies with a lot of non-office workers, you can double or triple your line count easily, right? And then if you put in a 5G, a private 5G or a managed 5G service, that's not going to change for the next 10 years. No one is going to redo it for the next 10 years. So your customers become really sticky. Yeah. And of course, then the ARPU is huge in that case. But it is a much more complex uh, business case to sell to the end customer. But it's 10 years of pretty much assured revenue.
Right. So I think something like this would give telcos the opportunity to make revenue long term. I think you were also mentioning earlier about a construction worker use case where they need to make sure that they are very accurate in how they are communicating with each other. Can you tell me a bit more about how Smart Walkie basically enhances customer experience?
So I think the first group of users that we serve are those that need group voice communication, right? So and this is not just in construction. So for example, um, in a hotel, right? They have different groups. They have the housekeeping group, they have the front office group, they have engineering group, F&B group, right? So if you go to a banquet, you will obviously see that they're all sometimes they are mostly wearing a walkie-talkie with a earpiece. And when they press a button, they actually talk to a group. So why is it a group, right? Because it's just much more easier to just press and talk, and you know that it's connected to your group of 20 people, but you don't have to specifically find a person, and you know that the manager is listening, everybody is listening, and they don't need to pick up the phone, right? So that is the first case of why they need group communication. It's really the workflow, the existing workflow that demands a group communication. So let me give you another example. Um, let's say a plane is coming in, right? And Singapore is a big airport. A plane is coming in. There is the ground crew. There are like 8 to 10 people just serving a plane, right? And they might come from 4 different companies. So that's 40 people serving a plane because the plane has to be, the fuel, the food service, everything has to be done in 40 minutes, right? And there might be people at the counter, which is like 1 or 2 kilometers away from the gate, right? So there's a large long range communication as well. So, and these are people that might be from different companies. So how do you get them to work together? So and so you could have different groups, one for the ground crew and one for the food service, but the managers still need to listen to these 2 groups at the same time, right? So there's still an overview channel for the managers to listen to it. Yeah, and I just want to say something and think of the group as being dynamic. So when the plane takes off, you might be reassigned to another flight, but your colleague beside you might be reassigned to a third flight, right? So the group breakdown and the group creation is something that we have automated as well, according to integrated with ERP system, so that all this is easy. The worker just sees one group and he knows that, oh, okay, so now it's flight 123, and after this is flight 1234, right? So I when I talk there, I know that there is going to be a manager for 1234 in 15 minutes. Yeah. So it really depends on a lot of the existing workflow that companies have, but a lot of this workflow is not as IT enabled as what we're used to for the office workers. Yeah.
So that's a very interesting example. And that brings me to my next question. Do you have any case studies or any pilot results that you had where you saw a telco customer get significant improvements using Smart Walkie?
Well, I mean, we are about 10 years old at the company and the push a dog concept. So I think we have it's not more of a POC, it's more of it's already core requirement, I would say, for most of our customers. They can't imagine not having it, right? Because if you don't have it, either you make a phone call, which doesn't work, or everybody joins a Zoom meeting all the time, and then you hear everything all the time, and it takes a lot of battery, or you have to physically walk to another person to tell you something, or you go back to the traditional ones, right? So I don't think that I think most of our customers already have benefit from it every day. It's kind of like, what's the benefit of having Google Meet or Zoom? Like, it's if you use
Yeah.
it, even if you don't use it, you sort of understand it, right? Because it connects people in a way that if you don't have it, it's kind of tough. Life is hard. Yeah.
So you mentioned how your customers are at that point where they can no longer live without this or don't know what they will do if they don't have this. What do you think for telcos that are not adopting something like Smart Walkie or a solution of this sort? What is the risk that they're looking at?
It's not so much of a risk. I will ask a different question. Why are not more telcos selling this successfully? Because a lot of telcos do try and pick it up, and they do try to sell it. We and every few years it goes, a new website goes up and then it goes down. So I think that the issue is more of two things, right? So one is hardware, which we talked about. The other one is the account, because it's not as frequent as other use cases. The account managers might not be too well versed in it, or they don't know how to spot the opportunities when that the customer needs. Because so let's say account manager A, they visit an industrial plant and they say, oh, well, actually maybe they don't even visit it. The industrial plant just calls and say, I want 30 phone lines, 30 SIM cards, right? Or 300 SIM cards. So does the account manager know that there is something that's suitable for customers profile like this? And then number two, is there anyone that they can speak to? Does the account manager get a trial device that they can give a customers? Because hardware is such a big part of the sales process in our experience. So I would say, to be successful, other than awareness, um, the product side of the telco or us as a partner needs to be embedded in the sales process in terms of providing hardware with SIM cards so that customers can trial, so that the account managers can physically show the buyer and they can test it out. Uh, one, I would say 100% of our sales have to go through a trial. We do not believe that if there's no trial, the customers have a good understanding. Because again, going back to our user type, they are not as um they're not as well versed in the IT side of things, right? And because hardware affects such a big part of the experience, basically, if it was up to me, every account manager that wants to go to a to a customer that fits my profile, I will stuff them with two or three handsets and make sure they demo it, because that makes a huge difference in closing the deal.
That's very interesting. And I know Smart Walkie is currently also working with Singtel. What would you say was the moment where Singtel and you guys and your side realized that, okay, this is something that we want to work on together? What made Singtel get on board with your solution?
At the start, it was a customer requirement, right? Because the customer had to migrate from 2G to 4G. So it's kind of like, hey, I think we have this and we need to move to this, or we have to move to something, right? So, and these requirements are quite common. And even now, we have customers going to telling the account managers that, hey, we have traditional walkie-talkies and they're 10 years old and it's due for a refresh. What options do we have, right? And yeah, that's when the account manager starts to ask the product team, hey, what what do we have, right? The product team has to answer. So so that's one. And the second one is, why did they choose us? I would say honestly, it's because we have a long working relationship. Yeah. And also, to be clear, I don't think uh well a telco could sell multiple similar solutions. And I think that would be a smart thing to do as well, for a product team to evaluate one or two solutions and have a competitive bid for it.
Right. You were mentioning earlier that for a lot of the account managers that you guys work with, awareness is a big issue. Was this a similar challenge that you faced with Singtel, or was it something completely new when you decided to work with Singtel?
It's definitely a awareness and issue, because I think in terms of account managers seeing the requirement, they probably only see it once a year or once in 2 years. I know that because we interface with different account managers every deal, right? So you can sort of guess like, oh, this can sort of see because, and it doesn't repeat, so it doesn't get, when things don't repeat, people don't get into the flow and remember it too often. Yeah. So I think that's common. And but I think on the product side, what we can do is make sure the product managers remember us. And number two, make sure we take as much as possible, we take the product knowledge load of the account manager and onto us. And when I say us, I don't mean us physically going for the meeting, but making sure the device is there, because once the customers use the device, they pretty much understand it. And then there might be more complicated product push to talk specific questions that we can answer remotely. So we also do, if you're an account manager, you get a pre-sales guy with you just remotely, and then you have the devices to show to the customers.
So, do you think there were any wow moments in this entire journey of Smart Walkie working with Singtel, where you could see that, okay, this was making a tangible difference?
I would say that if I would say that come renewal time, it's very difficult to dislodge, because, okay, so let me give you an example. We have a certain hotel in Singapore. They use normal consumer phones, but they have a Bluetooth headset that's provided by us. That account is not going to go anywhere because that Bluetooth headset, I mean, it's a bit expensive, right? So it's like a hundred,
Yes.
$200. So they have to use it for 4 years at least, right? And you don't want, the customer will probably stick, because even if a competing telco gives you the same price for the same card, gives you a similar PTT app, you have a hardware there that you can't just discard, right? Your finance will ask you, hey, why isn't this depreciated over 5 years?
Yeah.
Right. So I think I think our the monthly cost we charge to Singtel is not huge, but I think the ability to keep the line count, that's huge for them.
So, for such a niche product like yours, do you see this technology, this product itself, revolutionizing the way businesses and telcos communicate? Um, I know this is a very niche specific, very business specific for people that are on ground. But is there that spark or that moment where you're like, okay, we are doing something that's truly game changing here?
Uh, okay. So we keep going back to the 5G thing, because I think that's like, in terms of, from my point of view, that's the most exciting thing.
Yes.
Because sorry, other than push to talk, we actually have video and audio calls like what we have on this, right? So you can't run Google Meet on the private 5G, or you can, but it is, well, actually, no, you can't, right? So if you think about it, the people want video calls, right? But if you're on a private 5G that has no internet, then somebody has to provide it, right? So that's there's a lot of opportunities for the telco to get in, once they really start shifting their focus from, I'm a cellular company, to more of a, I'm a communications company that is tailored for enterprise. And enterprises are usually a single location or multi-location. So to me, the most exciting thing is the companies can actually bring up to date communications that the consumers are familiar to their work that's in the field. Um, and that can be done with that can be fulfilled effectively and cost effectively with 5G, which couldn't be done previously on 4G.
That is very interesting. And that brings me to my last set of questions. Is there something new or something interesting in terms of product or feature that you're working on that you think would get telcos really excited?
Okay, so we acknowledge that the hardware issue was like the device matters so much, right? Um, but we are making a Bluetooth accessory. If you think about it, it has a push to talk button, it has a speaker, so that you can use it with any phone, right? So yeah, you can use it with a normal phone. So even if the phone is not loud, even if the phone is doesn't have a push to talk button, this Bluetooth accessory will will alleviate all those issues, right? And it can be then easily bundled and sold with your standard phones. Because one barrier that telcos have in terms of selling phones that they have never seen before is they're worried that the network team will say, why are you selling this weird thing? Right? But I mean, honestly, these days the technology is pretty much standardized. But yeah, but if the customers really want to go with a standard phone, we do have, we are making a Bluetooth accessory that will allow people to still use it quite effective. Will allow people to use push to talk effectively.
Interesting. If I am a telco, where do I start with Smart Walkie?
Contact us, get a trial. we we want you to use the device so you understand how it works, and you appreciate the use of it outdoors as well.
That's amazing. Um, Towards the end, I am going to ask an offbeat question. What is the one hack, Wenhan, that you swear by when it comes to managing your productivity?
Voice. So let me explain. So we have our daily stand up. So firstly, we are a remote team, right? So most of we are distributed in India, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, US. So we are remote teams, and I think it's really important for every working day to have 1 hour where people are available for meetings at the same time, and then there is also a stand up meeting at that time, because it's just much easier and faster when you go on voice or video, and to resolve stuff rather than typing and typing and typing. So that's coming from a voice communication provider, but yes, that is also what I think is very important.
So I think, Wenhan, this pretty much brings us to the end of our conversation. It has been lovely chatting with you and getting to know more about Smart Walkie and how it is basically transforming telcos and their customers and what value it can provide. Thank you for joining us today. And for everyone else that's watching, thank you for tuning in to the AppTechCo podcast. We'll see you all next time.